Hey, welcome back to another episode of Addicted to Gear. Thank you for joining me. My name is Tony and I appreciate you guys tuning in. Today we're doing part two of the Donner Teardown and Rebuild project. If you haven't already watched my previous video on that, you probably remember the red Donner Strat that I got and reviewed a couple of weeks back. Well, the idea with these videos is to tear down that guitar and give it a little bit more TLC in the areas that it requires it, and basically come out the other end with a better playing guitar overall. So I identified a few aspects of that guitar that were a little bit lacking, and these videos are basically the down and dirty side of how I basically tear down a guitar, bring it to my bench and work on it. So the videos are not Hollywood. You'll see that, you know, the lighting on my workbench space is not the best, but it's really meant to give you a behind the doors look at how I work on my guitars. So this video is going to be focusing on the neck, primarily doing a fret leveling, polishing, recrowning, you know, the works basically to get this neck the way it should be, and to avoid any kind of high spots in the frets or low spots in the frets. And I'm going to show you how to do that. But I want to warn you, there's a lot of sanding involved when you're dealing with necks like this. So if you're not a fan of watching somebody doing a lot of sanding, well, this video might not be your favorite video. But I fast forwarded those parts for you so it wouldn't be too monotonous. But unfortunately, there's no way to avoid sanding when you're dealing with a recrown and polish. And in actual fact, the more sanding you do, the better the end results will be. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. So let's get started on this video so you can see the process for yourself.
All right, so now that we have the neck and it's free, we can take a quicker look at it and see if there's anything that needs to be repaired on it. The fret ends are already, they don't have any sharp edges here. I already took care of those. Before I actually do any fret leveling, I want to make sure that the neck is actually very straight. And yes, it is perfectly straight. So next step is the boring part. And it's basically going to be masking off everything so that we can level it. And if you guys haven't done this before, I can tell you it's boring and it takes a lot of time. But the end results are worth it if you do a good job. Some people don't bother masking up the neck because they feel like they have a steady hand and they don't need to. In my experience, it's better to mask it because all it takes is one slip of the tool to mar up your nice fretboard, and then you have more work. So as you saw at the beginning, I was marking up the frets that I thought were high, but now that I decided to do an entire fret level, I might as well mark them all. So what you need to do at this point is just mark up all of the frets with a nice dark Sharpie. And the idea behind this is that once the frets are completely marked up with Sharpie, you will level the frets with a flat level sanding beam and get them all to be level, and to be able to see when they're level, there basically would be no black marker left. So option one would be a file that I epoxied to a piece of wood that basically acts as a level sanding beam. I don't like to use this too much because it leaves a little bit of chatter. What I do sometimes is I lightly use this one and then follow up with this. I think this is 400 grit sandpaper. Don't quote me on that. I don't remember the grit exactly. It's double-sided taped to a level, so I know that it's a perfectly flat surface. And I usually start off with this guy just to see where I'm at. So let's do that. And you don't need to put a lot of pressure, but you want to be even and make sure you touch all of the frets. Go slow. And the idea behind this is you want to see some shiny frets, and if there's places that still have fret marker, that means that they haven't been touched. So go slow, and here I can see that there's a couple here that are still relatively untouched, and a section over here as well. So the outside needs a little bit more work. And the idea here is to stop before you go too far, because otherwise it gives you more work when you have to recrown the frets. So looks good. There's only one of them here that is slightly high. And this side, a little stubborn. And we should be okay. Now what I usually do at this point is I just double check with my, double check the areas that have a little bit, if there's questions about whether or not the frets are level, I'll just check them and make sure that there's no back and forth movement. At this point they look good. That's all that there is to leveling the frets initially. Next we have to recrown the frets, and that's very time consuming, but I'll show you the beginning steps of that in case you're wondering how I do it. I like to use this tool made by Homeland, and it's basically a file that has diamond encrusted edges all along it. Basically what you want to do with this is just round the frets over and just leave yourself a little sliver of flatness in the center of the frets. You don't need a lot of rocking back and forth to achieve that with this. And your frets will be dull and scratchy at this point, but not to worry, because the next step will be getting them polished. If there's any little places that require a little bit more attention, now is a good time to do that. There we go. All right, we're good. All right, off to the next step. All right, so when it comes to sanding, I usually start off with 240 grit and work my way up. The best way to do this is not to spend too much time
when you're at 240 grit, you don't need to spend too much time. So I just basically will pass along the top of the frets just to remove any kind of roughness that's left over. But I do a very light pass because 240 is quite rough. It's mostly just to even out the spaces that I may have missed when I did the crowning. And it's very lightly at this point. And that's it. That's all I do with a 240. Next step, I go to 400. I just like using the little sponge because it's easier on the fingers, really. You can just wrap it around like that. Just wrap it around. And I usually use it at a point. You can use your fingers as well if you want to. But I find that using the sponge actually contours a little bit better. Now when you get to the higher grits, that's when the polishing really comes in. And take your time at this step, just to make sure that you're not leaving any places untouched. Alright, so that's all I do with my 400 grit. And as I go higher up, like 800, I get a little bit more aggressive with the sanding because I'm taking less and less off. So the idea is when the grits are lower, you're more gentle. When the grits get higher, you can be a little bit more aggressive. Sometimes when you get to the lower frets, it's easier to go with your finger because you can get in between the frets a lot easier. There we go. And I'll also do like a once over all the way up with my fingers. I'm just focusing a little on the feature. There we go. In there. So as you go up the grits and get to the finer grits, the frets are slowly gonna get a little bit more shine on them until we finally get to the buffing with the Dremel that I like to do, and that's when really we can get it into a mirror shine. There we go. All right, so 800. So you see, as you get up the grits, you become more aggressive with the sanding and it takes a little bit longer. So it's all relative. So now we're up to 1000 grit. Same idea this time. I'll just use my finger instead of using the little foam pad. At this point I get to feel the smoothness of the frets a little easier with my finger. You can tell if you're missing any spots. And just a couple of swipes back and forth on each fret is all you need. You don't have to go too crazy. At this point, we're just trying to get the scratch marks off. We're not like reshaping the frets or anything. We're just trying to get them to be smooth and polished. If you guys are wondering if you can skip steps when you're sanding, the real answer is no. I know you guys don't want to hear that, but really, if you take a shortcut, it's gonna show. I've done it in the past where I just wanted to get things done quickly, and I always regretted it. You're gonna feel it eventually, and you're gonna have to do it eventually, so why not do it when you have the opportunity? There we go. All right, so that was 1,000 grit, 1,500 grit, same idea. All right, it's feeling good so far. Next, 2,000 grit. All right, so here you can get a little bit of an idea where we got to if I just shine it in the light for you guys there. That's basically 2,000 grit. All right, we're gonna move on to 2,500 at this point. Now you see that for the next step, you're going to want to get your Dremel with a little buffer tool, a little buffer wheel, like so. And the secret ingredient you're going to want to use is it's called Tripoli buffing compound. Comes in a 1 pound block, and it's red in color. And what this is, it is a buffing compound that jewelers use when they're shining jewelry. And the different grits are indicated by different colors. And I go with red. Okay, so what you want to do is, it's going to get noisy, but bear with me. Just Dremel up a little bit of the paste and go to town on your frets. Okay, I'll show you how to do that. I have it set at 3. Just be careful not to get this in your eyes. Once you're done with the Dremel and the rouge, I'll just go over the fretboard one last time with a paper towel just to remove any kind of paste that I may have missed. So now I don't know if you can see how shiny this is. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get the glare, but you're going to see that it's pretty shiny. It's basically a mirror finish at this point. I'm just trying to get the reflection of the light so you can see that. All right, so at this point, if you run your fingers over the frets, they should feel like glass, and that's what I'm getting over here. And
At this point, if there's anything you want to do with the edges, you can do that as well. But when I did the sanding, I paid attention to the edges, so the edges are good and don't need to have any extra polishing. You can see the glare, I guess, on the frets. And that's what you want to see. You want to see like a super shiny glare on the frets. All right. So that's basically it for polishing of the frets.
Lordy, lordy, that was a long one. A lot of sanding in there. My fingers still hurt from all that sanding, and unfortunately there's no shortcuts. If you guys know of a shortcut, please let me know, because it's not a lot of fun. But unfortunately, that's part of the process. So if you haven't already subscribed to my channel and you like this kind of content, then please subscribe. This is why I do it. If you like the content and you want to be notified, hit the little bell icon and you'll be notified whenever I post some new videos. So that's it for now, guys. There's a lot more coming your way in this project and other great stuff. So please stay tuned right here on Addicted to Gear. See you soon.